Okay. Bonjour à tous, bonjour chers participants. Je voulais d'abord, en guise de propos introductif et aussi pour faire mes civilités, vous faire mes excuses pour le retard pour lesquels.
Greetings to you all and apologies for the slight delay with starting. As you will understand, last week was quite a testing one. We're gradually getting back to normal, but that notwithstanding, I'm sure we'll have an excellent session today, and that this slight delay will not put a dent in our good humor. That's the important thing. Today's session is dedicated to transparency. The Secretariat has indicated that the meeting will be taking place in French. This is almost the last session of my chairmanship. But in any case, I think it's great to be able to do this from time to time. We have quite a diverse room in terms of language use. We have English, French, and Spanish in the room. We also have Brazil, a Portuguese-speaking member. And so despite the fact I will be speaking French, we do have this linguistic diversity in the room.
I would like to welcome all participants to this workshop on transparency. As I said, my apologies for the later arrival, but I'm quite sure that we'll have a very fruitful and intensive discussions. I'm very thankful to everyone who was involved in the organization of this workshop. I would like in particular to thank the WTO colleagues, including the IT teams, video conference and conference team who have made this event possible, and the interpreters who will be covering this event. Kindly note that this workshop is taking place in person and via Zoom webinar with interpretation in English and French as well as Spanish. Interpretation can be accessed by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and choosing your preferred language for this workshop. You have information on how to access the different interpretation channels in the welcome message that was just put on the chat. Please note that you should switch to English only when needed. Otherwise, select off if the speaker is already speaking in English. And those speaking in French speaking and Spanish, what should they do? They should click in English, in Spanish or French.
It's only if you're listening to, if you want to listen to English, it's better to use a floor. Otherwise, there is an echo.
Okay.
For the others, okay, they can use their appropriate language.
So this is only meant for addressing those speaking English. Okay, good. The purpose of this was to provide an update on recent development related to transparency and in particular, present some of the functions of the new IPIN, SPS and Tbt platform, which integrates SPS and technical barriers to trade online tools. We'll also hear about the ITC project on the use of the new platform. In addition, following this meeting workshop, a notification clinic will be held this afternoon in virtual mode only, allowing participants to the opportunity to address any concern on the notification submissions functionalities of the platform. It is not the first time that the WTO hosts an event on transparency. This workshop will build on previous WTO transparency events, in particular, the 2019 and 2017 workshops on transparency. Links and other useful resources from these past workshops are available on the SPS TA Gateway. In terms of the structures and topics to be discussed at this workshop, the first session will provide an introductory presentation on the transparency provision of the SPS agreement and of relevant SPS committees and ministerial decisions. Next session, which is session 2, will discuss ongoing transparency-related works in the WTO Committee on Technical Barrier to Trade. Following this, session 3 will provide an overview of WTO tools and sources of SPS information. Session 4 will then take a closer look at the new IPing SPS and TBT platform, including the notification and outreach functionalities. And lastly, but not the least, in session 5, we'll hear more about the use of the new IPing SPS TBT platform. The link to the workshop's web page is being put on the chat now. It's done already. On this web page, you will find relevant information on the workshops, including the final program, which has been circulated to WTO members as document JAM/2015/ref1 on 15 June 2022. The workshop video recorded in English, French, and Spanish, as well as PowerPoint presentation that speakers will use in this workshop, will also be put on the workshop's web page following the event. At the end of each session of the workshop, you will be invited to ask questions. For participants attending via Zoom, please raise your virtual hand. I will give you the floor. So let us start now. Let me first give the floor to Orlando Alcala from the WTO Secretariat, who will provide an introductory presentation on the SPS provisions of the SPS agreement and the relevant SPS committees and ministerial decisions. Following his presentation, I will open the floor for questions. Orlando, please, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Chairman.
So my presentation is being, it's going to be shown to you in a few seconds. Voilà. So transparency is one of the core principles of the WTO. It's present horizontally across all WTO legal texts. And in particular, transparency is the main principle behind the trade policy reviews. So this peer review mechanism allows members to have a comprehensive overview of trade policies and practices. But also transparency provisions are present in the specific WTO multilateral trade agreements. In fact, transparency is a fundamental pillar in the implementation of the SPS agreement and other agreements such as the Tbt agreement. Let's try to remind us of why transparency is important. First, to be informed on regulatory requirements. Any changes on SPS requirement may affect market access. Transparency helps enhancing clarity and predictability by facilitating trade and reducing trade disruptions, making the business environment predictable and stable, as well as giving businesses a clearer view of future opportunities, thus encouraging investment. Transparency allows for advance warnings, providing more time to adapt. Finally, transparency contributes to improving accountability and responsiveness of the regulatory system, in particular through consultations or by providing comments, for example, through the inquiry points or notification authorities. Here are summarized the main transparency obligations contained in Article 7 and Annex B of the SPS agreement. Additional provisions are contained in the Ministerial Decision on Implementation-Related Issues and Concerns, document WT/Ministerial 01/17. And in addition, the committee adopted important recommendations to facilitate the implementation of the transparency provisions, which are contained in document G/SPS/7/Rev4. So these obligations are: first, notification of draft regulations at an early stage, when amendments can still be introduced and comments taken into account. Members have also the obligation to allow reasonable time to receive comments, discuss these comments upon request, and take them into account. Members should allow for a period of at least 60 calendar days for comments, and we'll see this more in detail. Second, ensure, Second, ensure that adopted SPS regulations are promptly published and allow a reasonable interval between publication and entry into force, which should be at least 6 months. And then ensure that one inquiry point exists, which is responsible for the provision of answers to all reasonable questions, as well as the provision of relevant documents. and designate a national notification authority responsible for the implementation of SPS transparency procedures. Now we're going to discuss these obligations in detail. First, before here, just to remind you where to find relevant reference documents, and the easiest, is to go to our transparency tools webpage, accessible from the SPS webpage of the WTO website. It is important to note that the latest recommendations on transparency, document GSPS 7 Ref 4, as well as the practical manual for notification authorities and inquiry points, will be or in the process of being updated. And this is to take into account the changes to the new online tools, in particular the new e-ping SPS and Tbt platform. Okay, so now we are going to have a closer look at the obligation to notify draft regulations. Next. If a WTO member is planning to develop a new regulation or to change a current one, and there is no international standard, or the content of the draft regulation is not substantially the same than the international standard, and the regulation may have a significant effect on trade of other members, members have the obligation to notify. In addition, following the recommended transparency procedures, even when the content of the draft regulation is substantially the same, members should notify. In terms of timing, as mentioned earlier, notifications of draft regulations need to be submitted to the WTO at an early stage, when amendments can still be introduced and comments taken into account. And members have also the obligation to discuss these comments, open request, and take them in and the results of the discussions into account. Members should allow for at least a 60-day comment period. For urgent problems of health protection, members need to notify immediately without any comment period. But it's important to note that members still need to allow other comments to make comments in writing, discuss the comments, open request, and take them into account. Now, in terms of formats, in addition to original, regular, or emergency notifications, members can provide additional information or changes through revision. A revision will replace an existing notification. Addendum is to provide additional information or changes to an original notification. For example, the extension of a comment period, or the change in the scope of products covered, or change of status of a regulation, if either adopted, published, or comes into force, if the relevant dates were not provided in the original notification. And the corrigendum corrects the errors in the original notification. You can also submit available translations and official translations through supplements. So this last one, addendum, corrigendum, and supplement, have to be read in conjunction with the original notification. Now, to give you an idea of what we are talking about in terms of notifications, here is an example of a template of a regular notification. This is the latest one that is used since 2008. So as mentioned earlier, members are encouraged to notify all regulations that are based on, conform to, or are substantially the same as an international standard, if they are expected to have a significant effect on trade. And also the notification format allows members to identify measures conforming to international standards. So I am highlighting here some in red, some of the information that can be provided in the notification template. So identify measures conforming to international standards, indicate proposed dates of adoption and publication, to provide a period of 6 months between publication and entry into force, identify trade facilitating measures, and provide at least 60 calendar days for comments. And next. So along with the notification, members should, whenever possible, provide a hyperlink or electronic version of the proposed regulation. And upon request, you need to provide a copy of the proposed regulation also. Now, regarding translation of notified regulations, developed country members shall, if requested by other members, provide copies of the regulation, or if too large, they can provide summaries of these regulations in one of the working languages of the WTO, Spanish, French, or English. Any member has the possibility to share unofficial translations with each other using the supplement format that we discussed earlier. And the sharing of translations is also facilitated by the new EPING SPS and Tbt platform, as we will see later. Other notifications that can be submitted to the WTO are notifications of determination of the recognition of equivalence of SPS measures, and that's in accordance with the decision on equivalence adopted by the committee. Notifications of special and differential treatment in accordance also with the decision on S&D treatment adopted by the committee. And according to the guidelines to further the practical implementation of Article 6, of the SPS agreement, also adopted by the committee, members are encouraged to inform the committee when a request for recognition of pest or disease-free area or area of low pest or disease prevalence is made, or a determination on whether to recognize such areas is made. And for this last one, there is no specific format available. And now on, again, where to find notification formats? Well, the easiest place is to go to our transparency tools page. There you have all the latest information on transparency. And of course, they are available also from the recommended transparency procedures and the explanation on how to fill these notifications. And finally, of course, through the online submission functionalities of the SPS notifications, via the new tool, the EPING SPS and Tbt platform. And this we will be discussing it in detail a little bit later. Now, regarding publication of regulations, as I already discussed, members need to ensure that adopted SPS regulations are promptly published. Next, please. And allow for a reasonable interval between publication of entry and entry into force of at least 6 months, except for regulations considered to be trade facilitating. And this results from the ministerial decision of 2001. Now, let's summarize the timelines for the SPS notification procedure. Members need to publish a notice at an early stage to enable interested members to become acquainted with a proposal to introduce a particular regulation. Then notify to the WTO the draft regulation at an early stage, allow to receive comments, discuss such comments on request, and take the comments and discussions into account in finalizing the regulation. A period of at least 60 days should be allowed for comments, as we have been discussing. And then after adoption and publication of the final regulation, members should allow a period of at least 6 months before entry into force. Now, if we move to the latest obligations, first, members have the obligation to designate a single central government authority responsible for the implementation of the notification procedures. And next, please. To submit notifications and to provide open request to other members copies of the proposed regulation, as well as to handle comments. And second, members have the obligation to designate at least one inquiry point responsible for providing answers to our reasonable questions, as well as for the provision of relevant documents. This can be, you can have one inquiry point or more than one. For example, some members, they have one inquiry point for each topic on food safety, on plant health, or animal health. And it can be the same entity as the notification authority. On where should notifications be sent? This can be done, of course, again, the obligation to notify is, the responsibility is the notification authority. It can be done online, as we will see. That's the recommended means through the EPING SPS and Tbt platform, or alternatively as an attachment by email to CRN, the Central Registry of Notifications. And then once these notifications are received, after verification, they are promptly circulated, disseminated to all WTO members. Again, as we will be discussing a little bit later, for notifying online, you need specific rights, and this can be requested by email to our SPS committee at WTO.org. But we will be discussing this more in detail. Now, beyond these obligations that we have just seen briefly, of course, there are other actions or responsibility that notification authorities or inquiry points can handle. No? And that can be the tracking, filtering, dissemination of SPS documents and notifications to interested parties, alert other government agencies or the private sector, other stakeholders in general of important changes to regulations, coordinate, submit comments on notifications of concern to trading partners and do the follow-up. And we will see that for these actions or these responsibilities, the EPING platform can be useful and appropriate. And of course, they can lead, facilitate, participate in national SPS coordination bodies, participate in SPS committee work, of course, following the work here of the committee, raise awareness in general at the national level, do trainings, facilitate capacity building, or request also as technical assistance to the WTO or to other members. But what matters above all is coordination, actually, and that's a key element: coordination of the inquiry point Nna with the missions in Geneva, the focal points, also with the focal points in charge of following the work of the three standard setting bodies that are recognized in the SPS agreement, or OIE, which is now called the WOA, World Organization of Animal Health, for Animal Health, Codex and IPPC, with other government bureaus in charge of SPS matters, the WTO Secretariat, of course, and private sector. We are almost reaching the end, but before, I wanted also to highlight reviews of the SPS agreement and recommendations on transparency. As you may know, the SPS agreement, the operation and implementation of the SPS agreement is undertaken every 4 years. And since 1995, there have been 5 reviews completed. The last one was the 5th review, completed in 2020. So in the periodic reviews, the committee has adopted recommendations on transparency to encourage members to ensure full implementation of the transparency provisions, and to the extent possible, follow the recommended procedure established by the committee in GSPS 7-4. In the context of the last review, the 5th review, members discussed transparency and coordination. And this was following a joint proposal from Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, the Gambia, Ghana, Kenya, Madagascar, Morocco, Nigeria, the United States, and Zambia. The committee agreed to address national coordination mechanisms in a workshop that was held in July 2019. And in their discussions, members underscored the usefulness of EPING as a communication platform as well. And the 5th review included 3 recommendations on transparency and coordination. And here, perhaps we are highlighting the most relevant, that members were encouraged to implement appropriate national coordination mechanisms to enable consultation and communication between relevant technical and trade policy experts to enable the development of coordinated SPS positions consistent with SPS obligations. Members were further encouraged to consider ways to strengthen international coordination on SPS matters. So here again, the new tool, the EPING platform, can help with this coordination at the national level. And before concluding, just to remind you that you can find additional statistics and graphs in the annual report on the implementation of the transparency provisions of the SPS agreement, and that these are contained in documents GSPS Gen 804 document series. This type of graphics. And I think, as you may know, also since 2021, the information content in the annual report on transparency, as well as the annual report on specific trade concerns, the GSPS Gen 204 and revisions, have been merged into a single document in an effort to improve the reports to provide a more comprehensive view of both the implementation of transparency provisions and the STCs raised in the committee, and also to align the periods of time covered, now covering from January through December of the year on the review. And with this, I finish this overview of the transparency obligations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Orlando. Now may I open the floor for remarks, comments, and questions? Does any delegation or participants wishes to take the floor? I see none. Is it? Okay. Neither from the room or online, I see no hand which is raised. I said in the check in the chat, maybe. Maybe there are questions in the chat.
Questions in the chat.
Yes. Are there questions in the chat?
Yes.
There's a question? Okay, you can go ahead. There are questions from, I think, from some participants.
Yes.
What are the participants?
Who decided?
Yes.
Murali, I think. Murali, you have the floor, please. Murali, you have the floor, please.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sir.
I have a couple of questions. Actually regarding the reasonability, I have a question whether is it decided by the WTO member or the SPS committee, and with respect to the MRLs in the context of SPS, some of these MRLs go beyond the harmonized levels at the codex. So, regarding the risk assessment dossiers, which is actually carried out based on hazard or risk, isn't WTO Secretariat, does WTO Secretariat mandate these documents to be submitted, or how is it, and the third question is on whether the WTO can provide an assessment of the SPS notification in terms of World Bank income categories or share of GDP, whatever share as yardstick is being used. So these three questions I would like an answer, please.
Okay, if may I? Is there any? How many hands are raised, please?
Others. Sorry. I will go ahead.
Just to go quickly, maybe you have the same questions. I will take one more question, Orlando, before you take the floor. Okay. What's the next?
Mr.
May Lord take the floor, please. Lord. Lord, you have the floor, please.
I think it's Ilo.
Ilo.
Yeah.
Ilo, you have the floor.
Allô?
Yes, madame.
Oui, bonjour à tous.
Bonjour, madame.
Oui, je suis le docteur Hilo Ramatafan, je suis l'autorité nationale de notification SPS à Madagascar. Donc, en entendant les présentations précédentes, j'aimerais quand même avoir quelques plus de précisions par rapport à l'autorité nationale de notification. Et il y a aussi, comme vous l'avez déjà expliqué, il y a quelques personnes qui peuvent constituer cette autorité. Donc, j'aimerais avoir quelques précisions à cette entité, je vais dire. Merci.
Merci, madame. Simplement pour une question de clarification, lorsque vous parlez des personnes qui peuvent constituer cette autorité, vous voulez savoir, est-ce par rapport au modus operandi de notification, pour être beaucoup plus précis pour qu'on vous apporte des
Could you be more specific with the question? Is it with regard to the capabilities of the people who are in a position to provide the information on SPS standards in the country, for example? The question
les personnes qui
is
constituer l'autorité nationale de notification.
about those who could be part of the national notification authority. As a national notification authority, is this a structure which would be established comprising different people, the notification focal point, people working in human health, animal health? Is that how they would be established? That's what I wanted to ask. Because currently, I work with one person under me with the notification focal point working with me at the moment, but we have that as a structure. So I would like to know how they can be established and if we can bring in other people to strengthen.
Merci, madame Hilo. Nous passons.
Thank you, Ms. Hilo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I can begin with the last question from Madagascar, from Ms. Hilo. As you have said, indeed, the national notification authorities and the information points, the contact points, are people who have to manage that responsibility, as we have discussed. And the important point is to clarify the different responsibilities. Who will be acting as a contact point and an information point or inquiry point, for example, in what authority, in what entity, in what agency of the government? It could be under the Ministry of Agriculture or under another ministry. And there is some flexibility there. The SPS agreement allows at least one inquiry point to respond to reasonable questions, and I will come back on that point in the area of SPS. As I said, it can be one inquiry point. It could be one person in the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, or there could be several. You could have someone who is to manage food safety matters, someone else who is to respond to questions on animal health, and then there could also be a third person who could manage those questions relating to plant health. Or there could indeed be two people, someone dealing with health and plant and the other dealing with food safety. There is flexibility there, but what is important is to clarify and define who those people are, how they are to be got in touch with. The contacts must be communicated to the WTO to be made available to the other members so that people know where questions are to go. It's each member that can decide upon whether it's the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Health, departments on animal health, for example. You might have a department that is responsible for plant health. It depends how you have structured things and organized things domestically. So there might be a certain logic there as to where those questions go and who they go to. There then has to be a minimum of resources, so at least 1 or 2 people who can help with that, who can set aside some time to do so. Perhaps it's not 100%, but a percentage of their working time, their working hours, which can be devoted to SPS matters. To come back
to English, the first question we had from Mr. Murali, I believe, on the what makes a reasonable question. Yes, in the agreement you have some examples of what could be reasonable questions, but what we will understand is that questions related to SPS. For example, a member may ask you to provide the legislation, an SPS legislation that is already in force, or the text of a draft legislation, or it can be asked questions on a risk assessment. You were making reference to pesticide MRLs, that if they are not based on science, for example. So that could be the purpose of contacting the inquiry point of the question taking of the member that is taking this regulation, applying this regulation, to ask for additional information. It could be to ask for a risk assessment on which the measure is based. So that's what we mean by reasonable. It has to be, of course, in the topic on SPS matters. It cannot be anything. And the recommendation will be for the member receiving the questions to answer as fast as possible, at least within 5 days, but at a minimum to acknowledge receipt of the question, for example, by saying, okay, I thank you for your question. I need to, consult, and we will get back to you, because some questions can be quite complex, and so you might need, as an inquiry point, to contact the appropriate people in the government to help you address the questions. And then I think I responded on the reasonability and like if the information is not based on science, so that won't be for the Secretariat. Again, on the WTO Secretariat we do not develop guidelines or other documents or recommendations or standards. Though that's the work of the 3 international standard setting bodies. So then any specific questions, substantive questions on the measures will need to be addressed to the member taking the measure, or you may ask for additional information to the 3 sisters, for example. And the last point on whether the SPS committee can provide information, economic information, shares in terms of agricultural production, I believe, or GDP. This information can be, there are different sources of information. In the WTO, we have the Economic Research and Statistics Division. They produce some information, also some statistical reports, annual reports with some data on trade. That will be one source. Otherwise, you may want to consult other sources of information. For example, you were mentioning the World Bank will be another appropriate source of information, or the International Trade Center. So there are many sources of information for general data on economics, on production. And you may also consult with the Secretariat, the WTO. The Agriculture Division also may have also some useful data, also the FAO and other sources. I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that those answers provided enough information to participants. But if you have any further questions, feel free to send it in the chat or to the Secretariat, and I'm quite sure that they will do their best to provide all necessary information. Are there any other hands? Wait.
Mr. Morali is asking for the floor.
I was told that Mr. Morali wants to take the floor once again. Mr. Morali, please, feel free to do so. You have the floor.
Yeah, I meant the notifications which you have done nicely in terms of W2 classification. I meant it to be reclassified in terms of World Bank income categories, or some percentage of GDP share agriculture. How relevant is agriculture for an economy to understand that? I meant the total notifications to the WTO by members. Thank you, please. Thank you, Chair, for giving me an opportunity.
You're most welcome, Mr. Morley. Mr. Orlando, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, just to mention, yes, in terms of notifications, number of notifications submitted to the WTO, some statistics and graphs are available from the tool, the EPING platform, and we will show this in a briefly. How to access some data. We have also the annual report I just mentioned on the document SPS Gen 804 revisions. The latest one was circulated in March, the Ref 14, which includes some information on the implementation of transparency, including statistics on notifications. And other requests can be addressed to the SPS, to us, to the SPS Secretariat, and we might try to help if possible in terms of if there was some specific information that was needed in terms of notifications that can also be looked on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? So I think is complete the question and answer session. So thanks for those who have taken the floor on this. We'll now move to the next sessions, which is session 2 for our agenda today. No. The next session will be on specific on TBTs, technical trade barriers. Donc nous allons passer à la session 2. Vous entendez un rapport sur les travaux en cours.
We will have a report on ongoing transparency-related work in the WTO Committee on Technical Barriers to Trade. The presentation will be delivered by Ms. Sarah Arel from the TBT team in the WTO Secretariat. Ms. Arel, I hope I am pronouncing your name correctly, and I do apologize if that's not the case. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. That was quite a good pronunciation. Thank you. So as the Chair has mentioned, I'll try to give you more or less a snapshot of work in the transparency area under the TBT committee. And maybe one of the points I'd like to make before going into the details is that there are basically 3 points I'd like to make. One is that the provisions under the SPS and TBT agreements relating to transparency are very similar. The related procedures are very similar. So I will piggyback on what Rolando has already presented, not to represent some of the information that would be also relevant for TBT. 2, there's quite some action and activity going on right now on transparency under the TBT committee. And I believe given the similarities in terms of provisions, but also in terms of challenges of the implementation of transparency provisions, these developments might be of interest to you and the delegates following the area of SPS. Of course, I'm aware some of you follow both. And for them, apologies, there'll be some maybe repetition for you of things you already know. And thirdly, as you know, we have now put under one umbrella a series of our SPS and TBT tools. And I believe that that will also facilitate your access to any information you may need of relevance under the TBT agreement or under the TBT committee. So I will now try to move on to my slides. Basically, very quick overview of the transparency provisions under the TBT agreement. I just copied and pasted from Rolando's presentation the first 4 key areas, and really under all of these 4, notification of draft regulations, publication of regulations, establishment of inquiry points, and designation of notification authority, the provisions and procedures are very similar. So I will not repeat that, but just to underline that with some nuances, overall, they're very similar. And if anyone is interested, we can go into the details further on in the Q&A. There are a number of additional transparency obligations under the TBT agreement. And one of them is the statement of implementation each member needs to submit upon accession to the WTO. For those who became members in '95, that happened at the time, and those members who are currently acceding will need to do this upon accession. And basically, this statement of implementation is there to explain to the membership how a member will implement the TBT agreement, providing information on some of the key laws and regulations, identifying who the inquiry point and the notification authority will be, where key regulations are published, maybe how long a comment period is typically provided, and so on and so forth. So this is a one-off obligation, but over time there could be changes, institutional changes also, which can be also submitted as a follow-up to the original statement of implementation. And this is under Article 15.2. Then there's another provision regarding agreements between members. This is under Article 10.7. So this is when two or more members come together and reach agreement. For example, accepting each other's conformity assessment procedures, or their then such arrangements and agreements are to be notified. I have to say we have seen less activity under this article over time compared to some of the other notification obligations. And I guess it's a bit similar to the equivalence notification that is in the SPS agreement. But in the case of TBT, this is already part of the agreement, original agreement. And thirdly, there are a number of standards related obligations, which are found in Annex 3, which relate to transparency. I will not go into the details of these, but just to recall that one difference between the TBT and SPS agreements is that under the TBT agreement, you have the technical regulations, which are mandatory, and standards, which are voluntary. And with regards to standards, there's a specific annex, which lays out the relevant provisions. And within that annex, there are a number of transparency related requirements. So this is just a snapshot of the obligations. Now, just to look at the statistics we have on TBT, a bit like, again, what Rolanda did, we have over time an increasing number of notifications being circulated. And last year was a record year, 2021, where we saw almost 4,000 notifications being circulated, around 2,500 being regular, and many others addenda and corrigenda. And of course, due to the high volume of notifications, both in TBT and SPS, we've also been the two teams, if you wish, which have adopted digital methods quite early on in the WTO Secretariat. And in 2021, 88% of all TBT notifications were submitted online. Some more statistics. These are the top 10 notifying members over time. Here you see some big markets, big economies, but you also see representation from all parts of the world. I see that in the room, it's not very easy to read. It's a bit faint, but we also have an LDC Uganda, which has been one of the top notifiers. And thanks to the active inquiry point, which has also actually facilitated notifications from other members in the Africa region, from the EAC. So this is just to give you an idea of the participation of members in the transparency mechanism. And in 2021, 83 members submitted at least one notification. And if we go back to 1995, and since then, 142 members have submitted at least one notification. And it's also maybe interesting to note that in 2021, 61% of the new STCs referred to notifications circulated, which means that the notifications also feed into the discussions of the TBT committee, in particular under the agenda item on STCs. I'd like to now spend a bit of time on the trial review process under the TBT agreement. This is again, piggybacking on what Rolando mentioned. Under the SPS agreement, it is every 4 years. Under the TBT, it's every 3 years. And this is an occasion where members review the implementation of the agreement, work of the committee, and work towards adopting recommendations, and basically establish a work program for the committee for the 3 years ahead. The 8th review was concluded in 2018 with a number of recommendations. And I just wanted to highlight that there were 16 transparency-related recommendations. And since it's been a while, I just want to focus more on the 9th one, which came after. But just in case you're interested, I put the reference of a document which explains what follow-up had been on all these recommendations. And maybe one key one was that in terms of formats, under the SPS agreement, there's already an addendum format with tick boxes where members can indicate why they're submitting an additional information on top of their original notification. In TBT area, this was a free text format, and members really highlighted the need to know and be able to follow where possible when notified draft regulations were actually entering into force. And that's why there's now a new format which has been finalized and agreed upon by the committee after 2018, where members can indicate if the reason for an addendum was the adoption of the measure, or its final publication, entry into force, or maybe sometimes also its cancellation, and so on. And maybe another one that also refers to the SPS committee's work is that there was also a thematic session held on sort of when to notify under the SPS versus the TBT agreements, and what would be a good practice in this area. Now, we just concluded the 9th trial review at the end of 2021, and there were, based on proposals from members, there were 19 transparency-related recommendations, and this is more than half of all the recommendations in the review document. And now I'd like to I won't go over all 19, but I'll just give you a snapshot of what were the main, some of the areas. They're all important, but I just want to highlight some which may be also of interest to the SPS committee. So one area was online tools. Members, of course, asking the Secretariat to improve and streamline current online TBT tools, including EPing, because as you know, over time, a series of tools had been developed. These are hopefully going to be historical references, or they are already the NSS, the IMS, and we have the Trade Concerns database and EPing. So now, as you know, we have brought these all under one umbrella through quite a comprehensive and laborious process working with our SPS colleagues. And this actually builds on a recommendation from a 2015 trial review report, where the committee had asked the Secretary to build an alert service for notifications, given the high numbers, as you saw in the thousands. And so it was in response to that mandate of the committee that the Secretariat had originally developed EPing in partnership with UNDESA and ITC. And since, although the mandate was originally for TBT, it already mentioned that SPS could also be added. And since from the perspective of traders, it was already much more important that they got all product requirements, we had already built it for SPS and TBT together. And what also helped in this process of streamlining the tools was a grouping that was created in 2021 called the Friends of Online Tools. Basically, members suggested that given the number of tools and the changes that were coming up, that they should be consulted and should provide regular feedback. And hence we had 3 meetings of this Friends of Online Tools, which also provided feedback into what became EPING, but also the Trade Concerns Database and some other initiatives we have. Another area where there were quite a few proposals, which ended up as being recommendations, were on formats and related guidelines. And here members indicated they want to improve the product coverage information in notifications, the description of content in notifications, and the reference to legitimate objectives in regulations. And I'll just say a few words on each of these. Now, the first on product coverage information, similar to the SPS agreement, also under the TBT agreement, there's a requirement to notify and identify the products affected by an upcoming measure. The issue is that sometimes this is provided as just text, sometimes in HS codes and sometimes in ICS codes. And if you look at the sort of track record in TBT last year, less than half of notifications indicated HS codes. And that poses some challenges to understand exactly sometimes what products are being affected, what's the volume of trade affected, and so on. So that's why there's sort of a push now to improve the information provided. In terms of ICS codes, the track record is better, but still there are also some gaps there. Now, the second area is description of content, and this relates in particular to cases where the original document is in a language other than English, French, or Spanish, because it's usually difficult to get hold of in a timely manner, translate and assess a notification document, which is maybe in Arabic or another language, which is not one of the 3 official languages. So a proposal is to actually extend information provided in the description of content to assist members to understand better what the measure could be about. And the third area is legitimate objectives. As you know, under the SPS agreement, there's sort of a clear list of objectives for which members take measures. Under the TBT agreement, there's no closed list of objectives. Of course, these legitimate objectives can be human health, environmental protection, consumer information, and so on. But there was, again, a proposal to be able to clarify a bit better what the legitimate objective of a draft regulation was. And then there's also a proposal to create a new format for what I had already mentioned, these Article 15.2 notifications on how members will implement the TBT agreement, because currently it's free text, and the suggestion was to bring more structure to the information provided there. Now, another area which comes up again and again is translations of notified documents. So one proposal, one recommendation is for members to announce through EPING the availability of translations of notified measures into any of the official WTO languages. As you may know, there's already a process to submit a supplement when any member has access to a translation of a document, let's say, or of which the original is not in English, French, or Spanish. However, in the TBT area, the supplement process hasn't really been used much, and the last supplement we received was in 2016. So this is sort of proposed as an alternative and maybe easier method of sharing unofficial translations by members. And I guess my colleagues will demonstrate to you how this can be done on EPING later on today. Another one is quite a challenge for the secretariats, but we will see how we can address this one, is to explore the use of IT tools such as translation software to provide unofficial translations of notified documents. So this is going beyond the first one, where if it's a member has available a translation, they can share it. But this is asking us, the Secretariat, to see if we can help in the process. And this is something that we will be looking at during the course of this year. So just to clarify, this is not to translate from English to French or to Spanish, but to translate from other languages into, let's say, English, French, and Spanish. And again, another area was coordination that came up quite a lot. So, and it's always a challenge, as also you have heard from Rolando, both in terms of being able to notify comprehensively and also being able to react to incoming notifications. Coordination is very important. So the committee agreed to hold a thematic session on good practices and challenges for domestic coordination and engagement with regulators and the private sector. And in fact, this session will be held in July. Another area is the process of commenting. Here already in the 8th trial review, members had agreed, but they reiterated in the 9th trial review to disseminate on a voluntary basis comments and replies, including through a website or e-ping. So basically, as you know, notifications are circulated through the WTO, but comments are handled bilaterally. And normally they are not made public. And through this e-ping mechanism, it is possible on a voluntary basis to post either the comments themselves on a notification or to indicate that comments have been provided without necessarily providing the full text of the comments. And this is already being used on the TBT side, and a number of members, including US, Switzerland, and Australia, have submitted information regarding their commenting. And I guess this could be something that colleagues could also show if you're interested. And finally, also on commenting, given the importance of the ability to comment, because after all, why are notifications being submitted at draft stage so that there's a chance to comment within a 60-day comment period? So under this, actually the technical assistance chapter of the trial review report, members have agreed to develop a good practice guide on how to prepare a comment on notifications. So these are not all, but some of the recommendations, and I can elaborate further if needed. And finally, given sort of the range of recommendations adopted, the technical nature of some of them requiring maybe ongoing attention rather than 3 times a year, the committee agreed to establish a new working group at its March meeting this year to advance with these range of recommendations. The working group is open to all members. It's to be held in hybrid mode to allow capital-based officials to participate. And it's to report back to the committee through the chair. And also any proposals for changes need to be obviously put forward to the committee as a whole. The first meeting of this working group was held in April 2022. And given the number of topics, there was a suggestion to prioritize and start with a few. So for now, the group is looking at notification formats and the issue of product coverage in notifications. A second meeting had been scheduled for just before the ministerial, but we had to postpone it given the attention was elsewhere. So we have yet to schedule the second meeting with our incoming chair. And lastly, upcoming TBT meetings, if you're interested, in July. In fact, the TBT meetings were scheduled for the week of the ministerial, so they were pushed now to mid-July. And there'll be 2 thematic sessions, one on transparency and one on access, MISMI's access to information under the general topic of regulatory cooperation, which is one of the topics the committee tackles on an ongoing basis. And under transparency, the 2 topics will be improving product coverage and domestic coordination. And then we'll continue with the regular meetings of the Tbt committee. And if you want to know more, dig deeper, here are some reference documents. We have a WTO Agreement Series Tbt Handbook, which explains a bit the agreement, and at the end has the text of the Tbt agreement and also all the decisions and recommendations of the committee. Unlike in SPS, where there's a dedicated document on SPS, SPS 7 Rev 4 right now, under Tbt, all decisions of the committee under all topics are in the GTBT 1 series. So we now have GTBT 1 Rev 14, I think, but we're also in the process of revising that. Then there's a Tbt inquiry point guide. Then over the years, there's been a series of thematic sessions on transparency. So I provided a link where you can find those. Then we also circulate an annual review report, similar to what SPS colleagues do. It's also a mandate from the Tbt agreement, so that I shared with you a link to the last one, and also to the trial review report, from which I pulled out the transparency recommendations, is also provided in a link. And lastly, there is committee guidance document on the coherent use of notification formats. When to use an addendum, when to use a revision, what's now the format of that addendum, what's the supplement. So all this is also in a dedicated document, which probably will be revised in light of the committee recommendations. So I think I'll stop there just by recalling once again the similarities between the agreements, that these may provide inspiration or ideas for SPS delegations, and also that thanks to the digital tools which you will be presented, I think it will be easier to access all this for you going forward. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Héral. Ceci étant, je veux bien vouloir passer la parole aux délégations.
I'd like to open the floor to participating delegations for any comments or questions they may have. The floor is open to anybody who wishes to take it. Feel free to raise your hand if you're online, or raise your placards if you're in the room.
Any question online? There's one question online from South Africa. South Africa, you have the floor, please. South Africa, can you unmute your mic, please? You have the floor.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thanks. Greetings to the members present in this meeting. We heard during the presentation that the 9th triennial review of the Tbt committee, as one of its recommendations, is considering to explore the use of IT tools such as translation software to provide unofficial translations of notified documents. Appreciating that both SPS and Tbt committees use EPING for the transparency purposes, we'd like to find out, assuming that this intended idea of exploring the use of IT, assuming that it materialize, does this mean then that it will also benefit the SPS committee, or it will only be limited to the Tbt committee, being the recommendation from the Tbt committee? Is the first question. The next question is with regard to the timing for this review. We heard that at the SPS committee, the review is carried out every 4 years, while with Tbt, it is carried out every 3 years. The question is to establish as to why this shorter period for Tbt and little longer period for SPS. Is it something to do maybe with the measures as is applied as SPS, or maybe it is how the technical regulations and conformity assessment matters are addressed at Tbt? Just to get clarity on that. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, sir. South Africa, Mrs. Serial, can you provide some answers to that question?
Yes, firstly, on the translation software, I mean, I guess since the mandate was originally for the TBT side, we will take the initiative, but I think we work very closely with the SPS colleagues. And if there's interest from SPS committee, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't apply to both SPS and TBT notifications. I think technically, if and when we figure it out, and when it's acceptable, an acceptable method, I can imagine that even beyond SPS and TBT, this could be of interest. But this is just happened to come through the TBT committee, a bit like how the alert service request came through TBT committee in 2015, but then it was combined for SPS and TBT. Maybe I also want to take this opportunity to make one remark regarding SPS and TBT notifications in the broader context of WTO. Just to give you the figures in case you're interested. As you know, there are different types of notifications in the WTO. Some are one-off, some are periodic, and some are ad hoc, which is most of what SPS and TBT are. And if you look at in terms of documents circulated, last year, there were a total of 7,800 notifications circulated. Okay, some are two-page documents, some are longer, but total was 7,800. Almost half were TBT notifications. And if you add SPS, it makes 75% of all notifications circulated in 2021. So what I think that's why we also have, I think, a lot of our digital tools, and we often end up having to innovate or maybe find new ways. But over time, maybe some of these practices can also be spread to other areas. In terms of the timing of the reviews, in terms of the TBT agreement, it's already written in the agreement itself that it should be conducted, the review, every 3 years. In SPS, I think it was the committee that agreed on the 4 years, but I will maybe hand over to Rolando to complement on the SPS side.
Rolando.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to react to that. Yes, in the SPS agreement, it was also, it's in Article 12.7, it's also mentions also every 3 years. But after the first review was completed in 1999. And then in 2001, we had the ministerial decision that made this change to, the members or decided to review the SPS agreement every 4 years. So since then, the SPS agreement has been reviewed every 4 years, deriving from this ministerial decision in 2001. Thank you.
Merci, Rolando. Any other questions? I see none. Merci, Madame Hira. Nous allons passer à la troisième session de notre agenda de ce jour.
Agenda.
Qui porte sur les outils et sources de renseignement.
WTO tools and sources of SPS information.
Cet effet, je voudrais dire que
and here
on fera un aperçu sur les sources des renseignements SPS.
we will be providing an overview of WTO tools and sources of information, including documents online, EPING, SPS and TBT platform, e-agenda, and the Trade Concerns database. I understand that Ms. Nazia Mohammed from the Secretariat will deliver this presentation. Nazia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So there are several WTO tools which facilitate access to SPS-related information online. And in this presentation, I will provide you with a very brief overview of these tools. I will start with the Documents Online database. I will then move to the e-agenda, followed by the Trade Concerns database, and last but not least, the recently launched EPING, SPS, and TBT platform. So let me begin with Documents Online. The Documents Online database provides access to all official WTO documentation, including those related to SPS in the 3 working languages. There are several search interfaces integrated into the platform. As you can see on your screen, you can find SPS documents, for example, under Documents for Meetings or by using the search module for more advanced searches. Users are also able to sign up for an email alert service on documents of interest, including for SPS documents. Moving on with other sources of SPS information. The image on your screen will provide a little timeline of the launch of other SPS transparency tools over time. Some of you may already be familiar with the SPS Information Management System, or SPS IMS, which was launched in 2007, the SPS Notification Submission System, or NSS, in 2011, and the e-ping alert service, which was launched in 2016. Similar transparency tools for Tbt had also been developed around that time. Now, since 2020, 3 platforms have been launched: the e-agenda in 2020, the Trade Concerns Database in 2021, and the e-ping SPS and Tbt platform in 2022. As of this year, the IMS, NSS, and e-ping alert service are no longer available. Their functionalities have been integrated into the new e-ping SPS and Tbt platform. So let me move on now to provide you with a brief overview of these 3 recently launched platforms one by one. Starting with e-agenda. The e-agenda, as I mentioned, was launched in 2020. It is a collaborative online platform developed by the WTO and supports the work of the SPS, Tbt, and Market Access Committees. Now, as the name suggests, e-agenda provides an electronic version of the SPS committee agenda. It allows registered members to prepare for the committee meeting by adding interventions under any item in the proposed agenda, including to raise and support STCs. As it allows users to upload statements that are shared with all users in real time, the e-agenda has in this way significantly contributed to increased transparency prior to the meeting. I would just like to quickly add that the interface also provides some data on the meeting. For example, the number of STCs that are raised, the number of members raising and responding to STCs. You can see those in the colored boxes at the top. In addition to that, users can also download documents related to previous meetings, such as agendas and summary reports, as well as statements related to STCs. I will now move on with the Trade Concerns Database. The Trade Concerns Database, which was launched in 2021, provides access to information on specific trade concerns, which is available publicly, including those discussed in the SPS committee. On the database, you can search for STCs, for example, by ID, and this will provide you with a record of the discussions that took place on that specific STC in different meetings over time, as well as some other information, such as whether there were any related notifications. It is also possible to explore, visualize, and filter STCs by meeting, by the number of times raised, by keywords, by reported status, by products, and more. Users can also access member profiles to see that member's participation in the discussion of trade concerns. For example, the number of STCs it has raised, supported, and responded to. You could also find graphics on STCs on the platform, such as the number of STCs raised by year. In addition, the website also contains definitions of relevant terms such as members supporting, resolved concerns, members raising, partially resolved concerns, and more. Finally, let me move now to the e-ping SPS and Tbt platform. The e-ping SPS and Tbt platform went live in March of this year and integrates the SPS and Tbt online tools, including the IMS, NSS, and the e-ping alert service. On the platform, it is possible for the public to search notifications, specific trade concerns, and find information on inquiry points and national notification authorities. It is also possible to access additional statistics and graphs under the tab for facts and figures. Users with additional rights also have a wider range of functions available. For example, they can submit notifications, and they can also use the platform for outreach and communication purposes. And this will be further discussed in the upcoming session. I would also like to highlight that it is possible and recommended to sign up to receive alerts on notifications by clicking on one of the options indicated on the slide. To conclude, this table provides an overview of these different platforms that are available to search for SPS documents and their related functionalities. As you can see on the table, several platforms allow for email alerts and finding SPS documents. You will also see some bracketed X's, which basically highlight some of the limitations in terms of what you can search for or access via each platform. For example, the Trade Concerns database is not for searching for notifications, but you could have information on notifications that are related to specific STCs. Similarly, the e-agenda is not for finding SPS documents, but it provides links to documents online, to the SPS documents relevant to the meetings that you may be exploring. For example, the agendas and the summary reports. And as I mentioned earlier, you could also download statements related to STCs from the e-agenda platform. Under ePing SPS and TBT platform, the function to find other SPS documents is not yet fully integrated in the platform. And for now, users are still redirected to the old IMS to find other documents. And finally, just to quickly highlight that the ePing SPS and TBT platform is the only one which allows users to submit notifications online and access NNA and NEP details. And this you're going to learn more about in the upcoming presentation. With that, I would like to encourage you to send us your comments and feedback on WTO tools and sources of SPS information to spscommittee@wto.org. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Nazia. May I now open the floor for questions and remarks? Do you have any hand raised online? There's no, I see no hand raised, I think. Therefore means that the presentation was perfect. Thank you. Let's move to the next session, please. Je reçu l'aperçu de la plateforme ePing SPS OTC.
This will be an overview of the ePing SPS and TBT platform. This session will take a closer look at the presentation just made by Ms. Nazia and will be presented by Mr. Rolando Alcala, who will give a far more detailed overview of the ePing platform that has just been once again brought to our attention. Rolando, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Maintenant, pour cette
Now for this general presentation of the platform, I will begin and Carmina Baez will continue the presentation afterwards with a live demonstration.
So by way of background, the new SPS and TBT platform integrates 5 tools. The SPS and TBT IMSs that we just saw, the SPS and TBT NSSs to notify online, and the former ePing and SPS and TBT notification alert system. So this is already what Nazia just presented. So it is worth noting that the new platform mirrors search functionalities from the WTO Trade Concerns database, which now brings together trade concerns discussed in the SPS and TBT, as well as market access committees. And the e-agenda system to submit online agenda items ahead of SPS committee meetings remains a standalone platform. Authorized users will still be able to access e-agenda from this new platform. In terms of benefits, The new platform uses more advanced technology. It is more user-friendly and reduces data errors. It is a single source of truth, and all searches being associated with the same data. Also worth noting that it uses the WTO single sign-on authentication system. So you will be able to access it using your WTO login account for those who are registered. Now, the platform aims at serving the needs of members, but also targets a broad public, including academia and private sector. The functions of the 5 previous tools are now available in one platform, and these functions allow to stay informed, for example, to start with, stay informed, so to receive alerts on notifications based on markets or products of interest, particularly interesting for the private sector. Also to search SPS and Tbt information, we just mentioned that. You can search for notifications, specific concerns, other documents, but also contact information on inquiry points and notification authorities, and also allows for searches across committees, SPS and Tbt. Specific information by member also, profiles, notification statistics, and graph. Then the platform includes functions related to the submission of notifications. So this is equivalent or similar to what we had in the old SPS NSS, and allows for updating notification authorities, inquiry points, contact information. So this is something new, and we'll discuss it further. Finally, the platform inherited the reach out functionalities or communication functions from the old e-ping alert system. And these functionalities have been improved. So it allows to reach out at national and international level, in particular to see lists of national registered users, participate in chats, manage the national fora, or post information on international fora. But not everyone can do everything, and there are different levels of access rights. Sorry. Yes. So this is this is a public application. Anyone can search SPS and Tbt related information, and anyone can also register. And as of today, we have over 17,000 registered users, about 50% public sector, 40% private sector, and the rest academia, international organizations, or NGOs. So once registered, you will be able to receive alerts, save filters, and participate in national forum and to be contacted. So these are additional functionalities once you are registered. And then there are specific access rights to notify online. That's in the blue box on the right. In particular, admin users can update notification authorities and inquiry point contact information. They can draft and submit notifications, and they can grant notification drafting rights and or notification submission rights to regular users. And finally, there are specific access rights related to the management of the outreach functions. So as you can see, this is a quite complex platform in terms of functions covered and levels of access rights. So it is much more than just a typical database. And now what we will do is to go deeper into these functions and access rights through the live demo.
Live demo is coming.
And the live demo is coming. Yes, thank you. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I missed one slide. Sorry.
It's okay, Orlando. It happens.
Was a little too fast. Yeah, before going to the live demo, perhaps was worth showing the timeline for the development of this platform. So after its development of a pilot version, which started, so the project started in last year, in 2021. Interested users participated in the pilot testing phase in February of this year. And a total of 14 members and one international organization provided feedback on the new platform. And then this pilot version went live on 28 March, as you may remember. And now the next step will be the official launch of the platform that will involve senior officials of the 3 partner organizations, being the WTO, ITC, and UNDESA. And this is should take place on 13 July, before the meetings of the Tbt committee Sarah was referring to earlier. And perhaps also to that moment, we will announce also the launch, the availability of a mobile app also that hopefully will be available very soon. And with this, now we can move to the live demo. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Most welcome. Gender balance. Camila, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So now I'll just share my screen to give you a brief demo of the EPing SPS and Tbt platform. So I hope you can see it well. So this is what you see when you first access the EPing SPS and Tbt platform through eping.wto.org. At the top left corner, you can choose the language in which you prefer the interface to be displayed in, English, French, or Spanish, so the WTO official languages. At the top right corner, you will see that you have the Contact Us icon, by which you can send the Secretariat your questions, comments, and feedback. You also have the Register icon to register on the platform. You have the Login button in case you are already registered and would like to access. And you also have the option here to reset your password by clicking on the Forgot Your Password button. As part of the top menu bar that we see here, you will find the Search menu, which displays a drop-down menu for searching notifications, trade concerns, notifications and trade concerns combined, and other documents. So as Nazia mentioned, this is still not fully integrated into the platform. We'll just redirect you to the SPS and Tbt information management system, but just the section dedicated to searching other documents. And we will, of course, see these more in detail. You also have the opportunity here to find contact information of NNAs and NEPs by clicking on Inquiry Points, Notification Authorities. And from the Facts and Figures menu, we can access member profiles. You can find statistics and graphs and notifications. And you have here the link to be redirected to the Trade Concerns database, which we referred to earlier. Finally, under More Information, you will find answers to frequently asked questions, materials, which are still under development, and also relevant links to websites and documents, such as the SPS Gateway and the practical manual, but we will see that more in detail. Going here to the down on the welcome page, you will see 3 call for action boxes to quickly access the notification search menu, the trade concerns search menu, and to register to the platform and receive alerts if you have not yet registered. You will also find here information on the EPing application for mobile, which Rolando referred to just now. We also have latest news and events to the right, information on what is the EPing SPS and Tbt platform and what you can do in it, latest tweets related to SPS, Tbt, or EPing, and lastly, you will find here a list of the latest circulated notifications. So just to register on the platform before we go in more in detail into each of these menu items, you can click on the icon register at the top right, as I mentioned, or you can also find the option to click on the call for action box here, register and receive alerts. So if I do that, it will take me to a form which you would need to fill in with your personal information, such as name, email, country, sector, and organization. If you already have a WTO account, we of course encourage you to use the same email address to register on the platform for single sign-on purposes, as Rolando mentioned earlier. You can then here select products and markets of interest to receive alerts when new regulations of such products or markets are notified. If you would like to receive, of course, all notifications and no specific filter, we ask you to please not select products or export markets here. But just to say that you can, of course, modify this information and these preferences after registration. Lastly, you can choose to set the daily or weekly sending of information for alerts if there are new notifications who match your preferred criteria. And then lastly, you will complete the registration form and click on register. So if I go back to the welcome page, and now I log in as a registered user, I will go one by one just to show you what these menu items show here, the information that they contain. So under search notifications, as mentioned, you can search for here as a default, you will find all the notifications that have been notified to the WTO in terms of SPS or Tbt. You have here the free text search to look for notifications of interest. For instance, let's say that I'm interested in all notifications that relate to tea. And you will see how the list of notifications automatically updates depending on the information that has been included. Under area, you can choose either SPS or Tbt. In this case, I'm using SPS as an example. And of course, you can filter by the notified member and distribution date from and to. And you can select the date range from the calendar. I can also, of course, apply additional filters. As you can see here, search more fields. And here I can filter by the type of notification, either regular or emergency notifications, addenda or agenda. I can also further filter by HS codes, and I have the list here. And I can, of course, also filter by objectives, for instance, in the case of SPS, animal health, food safety, etc. So this is available for you here. One important thing to note is that this option to save filters, for instance, if I'm interested in receiving information on notifications that relate to tea, I can, of course, save this as a filter, name it tea, and it will appear under filters and favorites, which is the option that I have right here that you can see on screen. In case I'm interested in these types of notifications, as they update, they will appear here. So for each notification on the list, if I go back, you will be able to access the notification on PDF format, which is what we can see here. You can also find related notifications. For instance, this is an addendum, and you will see that the original notification appears here. You can, of course, click on it, and it will take you directly to it. You will also have the option to download the document in Word format just by one click, right next to the notification symbol. And you have a few more columns here, distribution and comments. So the date in which the notification was distributed. And you will also find here an hourglass symbol whenever the comment period on a notification is still opened, which is the case of this notification from Spain. In addition, in the new EPing SPS and Tbt platform, you can add notifications to your list of favorites by clicking on the star icon. You can also see notifications for which information or comments have been added. If I just go back here on filters and favorites and choose information added to the international forum, and you will see here that these notifications are specified by a green conversation bubble icon that you will find here. You will also see, for instance, I will just show you as an example, which was referred to earlier. Whenever an official comment has been submitted on a notification, this information will appear here. So in this case, this is a notification from Colombia, and the United States has submitted comments on these notifications. So this information will appear here. Important also to note is that this conversation bubble icon shows the international forum and the national forum, provided, of course, it has been activated by the outreach admin, which we will see in a few minutes. And the information that is available in the international forum will be visible for all users of the platform. But of course, in order to post information on the international forum, you will have to have outreach admin rights, which we'll also see later on. So, excuse me, as it was referred to before, I just want to show you here a few examples of notifications which have information added. For instance, whenever there is a comment that was submitted or a translation that is available. So as I mentioned, you will see this icon turn in green, and I will just look for some examples to show you how the information appears. All right, so in this case, this is a notification. This was sorry. Yes, I have a message from the interpreters. All right, so in this case, this is a notification by the UAE, and you will find in the forum that Switzerland has actually submitted comments to these notifications, and they have actually also attached the comments. And you will also find a message from the United States. This is an example of how to use the international forum to submit comments on these notifications. Another example that I would like to show you is a notification which has a translation available, as it was mentioned by Sarah earlier today. So in this notification, if we go to the international forum, you will see it's a notification from Malaysia, and it says that the English translation of the draft technical regulation has been made available and uploaded for your reference. So this information is very useful to find here. Now you know that by clicking on this information added to the international forum, and whenever this information is available, this icon will become green. Right. One last thing to mention is that you can send these notifications and share it with colleagues and interested stakeholders via email. To continue on the search menu, I would just show you very briefly the search for trade concerns and how it looks like. It follows a very similar structure to the notifications search menu. You can filter by area, either SPS or TBT. You can also filter, of course, by member and whether it was a member that was raising, supporting, or maintaining a measure. You can also find and filter by relevant HS codes. And of course, you can use the free text search. I'm going to use the same example and see if there are any SCCs that relate to T that have been raised in the SPS committee. Another thing to note is that you have a date range right here by which you can further filter the information. Let's say that I'm only interested in those that have been raised between 2017 and 2022. You will see how this information automatically updates on the platform. For each STC, you will have a summary of the interventions as reflected in the summary report of the meeting. I'll just show you right here so that you can see. Then you would also find here, whenever available, information on related documents and notifications as well. So if I go now to the search menu again, notifications and trade concerns, it's basically a combination of these two, very similar structure. And it allows, of course, the user to find this information and filter, again, using T as an example, by those who relate on notifications and trade concerns as well. As mentioned, other documents currently redirects you to the SPS and Tbt information management system, and the integration of these other documents into the platform. We're looking to have this done in a second phase. So now if I go to the top menu again, if I click on inquiry points, notification authorities, you will find information on SPS, notification authorities, and inquiry points by member, the WTO, in case you need to, of course, contact. And you can filter here this information. I will use, for example, Kenya, as I know they have inquiry points for plant health, animal health, and food safety. So you have this information available here. You can, of course, and this is throughout, export the information to Excel if you want to have it in one single file. Next, under facts and figures, you can access member profiles. So if I go here, I will use the example of Kenya once again. You will find here statistics on the number of notifications per year submitted. Also, the participation of this member in discussions on SPS and Tbt trade concerns. And further down, you will have this information broken down by areas, SPS and Tbt. So for SPS, you will see the National Notification Authority of Kenya, as well as the National Inquiry Points, the number of SPS notifications per year and by type of notifications, and further information relevant to the members. If I go back and I choose under facts and figures notifications, you will find interesting statistics on the number of notifications per year here by area, SPS and Tbt, but also again broken down by both areas. So you have statistics on and graphs on notifications submitted per year, regular, emergency. Interesting to know that you can click on one specific if you don't want the information to be showcased here, or I can do the same if I only want to see regular notifications. I can do that by unticking the other options. You will find the top notifying members, information of notifications submitted by development status, regional groupings as well, by objectives, and by keywords. So you have all this interesting information available here. And again, you can choose to only have one of the two options displayed. For instance, in this graph on trade facilitating measures in SPS notifications. So the facts and figures has one more option here. It's called trade concerns. And this, as indicated on screen, tells you that you will be redirected to the trade concerns database, where you can find additional, of course, and more detailed information on STC, as it's the dedicated web page for this. So one last point under more info, you will find here, as I mentioned, answers to frequently asked questions. You will also find materials once they're available, which are still under development. And you will find, again, relevant links to websites and documents. As I mentioned, for instance, the SPS Gateway, the SPS Practical Manual for NNAs and NEPs, and similar information for TBT as well as other relevant websites. So I will just maybe stop here and see if there are any questions at this point.
Thank you, Mrs. Carmina. I think for the first part of your presentations. Are there any questions, remarks, observations? I see none, Mrs. Carmina. That means the presentation is so far perfect. Can you pursue? Go to the second part of your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. So for the second part of the presentation, we would just go more in detail into the notification submission functions of the platform. And for that, let me just once again quickly share my screen, just as a reminder of what we saw with Rolando earlier on the different types of access rights. So for notification, we have notification admin rights, and these are users who are able to, of course, grant notification drafting rights and or notification submission rights to registered users of the platform. They can also, of course, draft and submit notifications, and they can update the information of NNAs and NEPs, so the contact information. As mentioned, you also have notification drafting rights, which are users who can create notifications but not submit them to the WTO. And you have notification submission rights. So these are users who can create and submit notifications to the WTO. So once a user has been granted with, for instance, notification admin rights, I will just quickly show you on screen what it appears when we have these type of rights. So let me just quickly share my screen once again. All right. So I should know that this is a training platform, just to show you these features. So once a user has been granted notification admin rights, you will see now that there is a new option here at the top menu called Admin Panel. And if I click on it, I will find the notification submission menu right here. So under Submit Notifications. So if I click on that, I will have here the notification submission menu, and where you can find, of course, the option to draft regular notifications, emergency notifications, addenda, corrigenda, supplements, and notifications of recognition of equivalence. For those who are familiar with the notification submission system, you will see that the notification submission menu of the new platform is fairly similar to the previous system. So to start a new draft notification, I just click on the plus sign here on screen. And I can either, of course, expand this menu and go one by one, or I can just click on each of the sections that I have here to input this information. I will not go into detail in filling a complete notification, but just to mention a few of the new features that have been added and some important information to have in mind as well. So on the top right, you will see this new button that was not there before. It's called Check URLs Are Working. So whenever you have links as part of your notification, it would be important to click on this before submitting the notification to make sure that all the links are working. This is the new feature that has been added to the submission menu and the template. Something important to note here, just to mention under revision, Whenever you are issuing a revision and you are looking for the notification symbol manual, so if you start to include this information, it will not appear here for me because I'm on a training site, but for you, you should have available the list of notifications. And as you continue to fill in the information, this will update. And what is important to note here is that you should click on the relevant notification instead of writing the information entirely and using that. Just to note that right here. And then here, of course, you have the option to retrieve the title of the original notification. For internal ID, just to mention that this is useful for members who are issuing multiple notifications, for instance, in one day, just to indicate the number or order that the notification should have, and this is useful for internal purposes. If you are also, I should note, a member who is issuing joint notifications and have those rights, you will have here additional features, such as the option to choose the member for which you are issuing a notification. Moving on, just to show you a few more details. This is also something new that has been added, is to hide the description of the HS code and the circulated notification. I'll just use an example. Right here, you have the option to tick this, and you will see how whenever I include an HS code, I can select this to the box by clicking here. This is again fairly similar to the previous template for notifications. You can, of course, upload your files to the notified document, description of content, objective and rationale. And just to mention a few more details under this final date for comments and also under the text available from, so sections 12 and 13, you have this new feature here as well to retrieve the Nna and Nep information. So if I click on National Inquiry Point and I click here, you will see how this information is automatically included into the contact details box. And this is very important because here you can check that the information is correct and then update the information accordingly before submitting a notification. Lastly, here, as a new feature, you have the option to save and complete a notification instead of doing the process before of saving the notification as draft and then having to go back to the dashboard before completing the notification. So I will not save this draft just to show you just some of the new features that were available. Like I mentioned, here on the notification draft dashboard, you will see that this is fairly similar to what we had before. You can see the notifications in progress, so those draft notifications, and you can click here to edit, complete, or delete this draft notifications. You can also click on the completed notifications to either review, submit, or delete completed notification. And you can see the list of submitted, approved, or issued notifications, as well as the saved templates. Notifications admins, as I mentioned, have additional rights, and one of them is to manage users. So if I click on this box here at the top right, you can here see the list of national registered users of the platform, by which you can later on grant notification drafting or submission rights. And here you can add new users. You will, of course, find a search box here where you can type in the name of the registered user. Important to know that it has to be already registered on the platform. And then you can grant this user notification drafting and or submission rights. And then you can click on Save. If I go back to the dashboard, something that I also mentioned earlier is that notification admins have the opportunity to modify the information of their inquiry points and notification authorities. So if I go back to the main menu, so the top menu here, I click on inquiry points, notification authorities, and you will see that, again, I'm on a training platform. For your country, it would appear as the first option. But you can see here that you will have these 3 dots available, and then you can choose to edit the information that appears here. So the name of the agency, address, perhaps the phone number or the email that has changed. And then you can click on save. I should highlight here that we will have later on today in the afternoon a notifications clinic, and this is targeted to NNAs and officials who are completing and submitting notifications. So in case you have specific questions related to the submission of notifications, we highly encourage you to attend this afternoon session. So again, I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions at this point.
Yes. Are there any questions and remarks at this point, please? I see none. Mrs. Kamina, you can proceed with that part of your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So as the last part of the presentation, we will just go a bit more into details of the outreach functions. So before that, let me just again share my screen. All right, so those who have outreach admin rights will similarly to notification admins will find under admin panel an option to reach out. So these are, this is basically the menu dedicated to the outreach and communication functions. So if you click here to reach out, you will see different options that are available to outreach admins. So of course, here you can find the list here of other admin users from different countries. Again, this is a training site, but you will find the real updated information here for other members. You can start a chat with one of the outreach admins that are displayed here. And then this will appear under this tab, admin chats. So I'll just do a quick test now to start the chat with my colleague. And you will see here the information that appears is a message box where you can add the information, just test. You can, of course, upload files, and you can post the information here. Here at the top right, you have the option, of course, to add participants to this chat. So we'll just close it. And then this information, as I mentioned, will appear here. You can open the different chats that you have. Under national EPING users, you will see the list of registered users from your country. So this is very useful, of course, whenever you want to create groups depending on the sectors that these stakeholders are interested in or working on. And for that, you just need to click on the specific user. You can add it to a group, or you can send an email directly. For groups, I will just show you real quick how to create one. So if I go on the groups tab, I can click on the plus sign, groups, and add, continuing with the T example. I'll just save here. And then under national EPING users, again, I can, for instance, now add my colleague to the group that I have just created, which will appear right here. So I click on save, and then I go back to groups. I will have this information available here. And you can, of course, create multiple groups and this information will be displayed here. You can edit this information, rename it, or remove group, and of course, add more users. And as I mentioned, this is very useful when you want to send information and share information with national stakeholders who are working on these different topics, or depending on the sector that they're working on. Just to mention this tab, non-registered contacts, here you have the opportunity to add contacts who have not yet registered to the EPing, SPS, and TBT platform by including first, last name, email, and organization name. You can click on save, and then this new user will appear here. You can add them to the groups they have created or choose to send them emails if you wish so. And lastly, on this tab right here called National Forum Settings, this is where you can activate the national forum where national registered users could go and exchange information on the notifications, which we have seen. But just to show you once again, as an outreach admin, if I go to notifications, I will choose the area of SPS, just as an example. And then here, if I go to the forum, as an outreach admin, I can post a message to this notification from the European Union. And you have the option here to click when this is an official comment or reply to this notification, whenever it has been submitted, and then you will see a green tick available under this notification. And here you can upload a file. As I mentioned, of course, this is useful whenever you want to add your comment, not just indicate that an official comment has been submitted, but you can also add the comment here, which is one of the examples that we saw before. And you have this opportunity here by uploading a file. So I will just click on post. And this is how it would look like whenever an official comment has been submitted. Again, here at the national forum, as I mentioned, would be available to those registered users from the country. And then here you can, of course, exchange comments and information. This will not be displayed only for national users, but the information posted on the international forum will be available to all users. So I think with this, I will stop at this moment and then similarly see if there are any questions or comments on this part.
Thank you, Ms. Camino. Thanks for the very comprehensive presentations. I think this ends your presentations, but before closing the sessions on this item, are there any remarks, questions, observations, either from the floor or those attending online? I see none. Congratulations, Mrs. Camila. Congratulations, Rolando. Thank the work. Congratulations for the work. Well done. I think this is a very important tool. So I hope we'll make good use of it. We have so many component and items which are quite informative for our works. So let us move to the next items in our agenda, which is item 5, if I'm not mistaken, with sharing of experience. This will be the before the AOB is the final sessions. Yes. So, but before moving to the next, the final item in our agenda, bank is worth recalling that this afternoon there'll be a session online sessions. And the session will be on this tool which has just been shared with us, which is a new IPing SPS on TBT's platform. The Secretariat will provide more details on the use of this tool. Therefore, I would want to thank the Secretariat for the valuable information provided and take this opportunity to remind interested participants, and in particular from SPS notification authorities and inquiry points, that will have a notification clinic this afternoon sharing at 3 p.m. to further address any concerns on the notification function of the platform. The link to join the notification clinic has just been added to the chat. I kindly invite all those who want to have more information on the use of this clinic to kindly attend this on this tool, to kindly attend this platform at 3, which will be the notification clinics. Moving to the final session of this workshop, in which experiences related to the use of the new IPing SPS and TBT platform will be shared, in particular the use of the platform outreach and communication functions. I would like to invite Mr. Vianney Lesave from the International Trade Center, who will present an ITC project in Vietnam, to please activate his microphone and camera. Mrs. Lesave, you have the floor. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. If not, please, I beg for your indulgence. Please, you have the floor, Mr. Vianney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, you pronounce my name very well. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you can hear me well. I am not too far from you. I am from the International Trade Center premises here in Geneva, and I will present you the experience that we did along with our colleagues from the WTO and the UN in Vietnam for our reach to Vietnamese traders. So if you can.
You can proceed, sir.
Oh.
We can hear you. You can proceed.
You can hear me.
We can hear you. You're audible,
okay,
sir.
Okay, great. So let me share my screen.
Please, can you maybe adjust your mic? I was just told that the French interpreters has difficulties to hear you.
Yes, excuse me for this. Can you hear me better now?
I don't know, I think. I think adjust your mic. Can you bring your mic close to your mouth, maybe? To improve the quality of the sound, please.
Yes.
Je pense que vous pouvez rapprocher votre micro de votre bouche, peut-être, et on a des difficultés à vous entendre.
Oui, oui, j'ai bien compris.
Is it good for the interpreters now?
Is it good now?
No, they still have some difficulties. It has improved, but not not sufficiently. Can you hear us, please?
Comment?
Can you hear us? Est-ce que vous nous entendez? Can you hear us?
Je vous entends très très bien.
S'il enlève son headphones, avec le mic et
Yes.
le laptop directement.
Est-ce que vous pouvez mieux m'entendre maintenant?
I think it's quite better. Is it okay now?
It's quite far, the sound. It seems very far from. Can you speak closer to?
On y arrivera. Yes, yes.
Sure. Excuse me for this. Can you hear me well now?
Is it better? No, not yet. Not yet.
What about now?
Can you increase the volume? Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Is it
The
good
other
now?
thing is better. Yes.
Much better.
Much better.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much for this. I'm hearing myself. What about now?
It's better now. I think it's good now. It's good. You can go ahead, sir. You can proceed.
Thank you. Wow. All right, excuse me for those technical glitches in the start. I'm going to talk about the experience of Vietnamese traders and what we did with the outreach through IPing. I am just hearing myself through as an echo, so maybe if you can mute the room, it would be very good. In the International Trade Center, we run businesses on getting the perception and the experience of traders in 65 countries we did already to understand what are the obstacles that they face in relation to their operation of export and import. And this is leading us to IPing. Because in Vietnam, for example, through the business survey that we did, we understood that 57% of the issues related to export and import of Vietnamese traders are linked with technical measures, SPS and Tbt, technical requirements, and conformity assessment. Among those, and I give you some examples here, many of the issues faced are linked with lack of information to the external markets. So here I'm giving you some funny examples, for example, for frozen shrimps to Germany, fish to Japan, etc., that you could see on this slide. No due notice, the company got this information too late. The company did not know about the fruit seasonality until mid-seasons. And overall, the companies were reporting issues in being updated with the changes in foreign regulation outside of Vietnam. So how can we solve this? You know it already. This is through IPing. This is one example of the issue that we face here in the blue square that I've put below, directly a narrative from a Vietnamese company, right? Saying about the export of Japonica rice to Italy faced by traders, and they didn't know about maximum residue levels for this into the rice. And unfortunately, this was causing issues for those businesses. And the information is directly into IPing. It was already into IPing, and this underlined the fact that in Vietnam, through the network of inquiry points, businesses did not know about this great tool. They had no idea that directly being informed and being registered to IPing, as our colleagues were showing to us before, would have been the solution to tackle this obstacle faced by them. So the question was how to enhance the outreach of IPing to directly at the source, not having this issue for the traders anymore. And this is what we did with our colleagues from WTO in Vietnam as a pilot project. The challenges were what I just said, the focal points, the inquiry points were not reaching companies on IPing. They told us, we like IPing and we know IPing very well, but how do we really use it in our support to the private sector? They also told us from the inquiry point, SPS in particular, there are many notifications. We saw the numbers with our colleague just before. It's a technical language that businesses do not really end up understanding. The SMEs do not know IPing, and we are many institutions. We do not know who is in charge of what, who can take IPing and bring it to the knowledge of the private sector, etc. So this is where we did some great activity. It was last year in the spring of 2021 to provide efficient tools to focal points for the dissemination of the knowledge of EPING at the national regional level. So we did something that we often do. We went back to doing training along with the inquiry points in Vietnamese language, and doing something called the training of trainers to give them, the idea that EPING is very easy to use. It can be of great use to be notified and not really understand the content of the notification at first, but having just the notion that something is happening on the foreign market was already something decisive for the companies. So we did collaboration with them on training, and we built some communication material in Vietnamese for them to be aware and ready to communicate to the private sectors. And this is where we went to the big part of this pilot project that we did, is that we collaborated with university to translate the content on selected notification and provide explanation in a simple and understandable language. I have more information about this, but this is linked to what Madame Serra was telling you before, the translation of the notification, selected notification. We did a communication campaign, and we clarified the role of each support institution, inquiry points, the Viet Trade, the ministry, etc., into knowing who does what. And the perimeter, I call this a perimeter of action for the outreach to the private sector. So about this interagency effort to reduce the lack of information on regulatory update, we selected a number of 3 sectors and topics based on the interest on our counterpart there, Viet Trade and the ministry. Those ended up being fishes, leather products, and fruits and vegetables. Then we led these very interesting aspects of translating an explanation of selected notification before doing the outreach to the private sector. So this part number 2 here, the translation and explanation, went like this. We partnered with the Foreign Trade University located in Hanoi. This is one of the biggest universities in the country, and particularly in the field of trade, for the 3 sectors selected of fishes, seafood, leather products, fruits and vegetables. And voluntary students translated selected notification of interest and led a work of explanation with experts in Vietnamese language on those notifications to explain that there was a notification, what was the notification about, and what was going to be the impact on these regulatory changes in those foreign markets. So that took 1.5 months. It was very quick. It was on voluntary basis for some students at the year number 2 of the bachelor level of the university. And it led to the training of 26 companies for all 3 sectors after this. So this pilot project was uploaded to the National EPING Fora and was quite successful from the different actors involved into this. We wanted to try to use this academic environment to clarify, enhance the knowledge on some notification, and to provide also to students practical examples of international trade to illustrate and to give some case study for their diploma, for their curriculum. On the perspective of the Foreign Trade University, led there at the International Trade Bureau, it was very successful. So the company wanted more sectors to be covered. They reported that company wanted much more translation, much more explanation, etc. And it has been included now in the syllabus of the company to give this opportunity now not only to volunteer students but to all students of this class to do those explanations. So here we have a good statistics. 97% of the company wants the project to be carried out of the long term and to be expanded to all sectors. And from the point of view, very interesting point of view of the volunteer student that took part to this pilot project. So they say it's a very hands-on learning opportunity for a student, etc., and to be able to link with the private sector. So this great example is something that we did once last year in Vietnam, but we are looking forward to doing it again. Partnership with university, with other institutions in your countries, if you're interested to do so, to provide more vulgarization, right? Some simpler way to express the content of the notification, explaining the content of selected notification in some sectors in other countries. This was quite successful. Here you see the old version of IPing translated in Vietnamese. This title here in Vietnamese, I didn't want it to translate it because it means simply notification system for SPS and TBT. Our Vietnamese colleague might confirm this. And now the traders can use IPing that we also translated, by the way, in Vietnamese to stay alert on the notifications. And here I have put you some numbers for this to show you that out of this, the inquiry point reported to us that the use of the number of users went very much up, and that they could actually and efficiently provide a better support on our reach to the private sector through IPing. IPing has become for those institutions a meaningful and efficient tool to the private sector, and we think that we understood that we needed this step with the academic world to help us into processing the notification, into clarifying them as non-official translation, as we discussed before, to the benefit of the private sector. So that was quite successful, and as I told you, we are looking forward to doing it again in partnership with the WTO, us at ITC. So thank you very much, and again, sorry for the technical issues at the start of my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Lizav, thanks for your presentations. This brings us to the last point of our last items of our agenda, which is the closing remarks. As we approach the end of this workshop on transparency, let me thank all of the speakers for their presentations and interventions this morning. I must also extend my sincere thanks to the interpreters for their kind words. Rest assured that we value what you're doing. We have heard very interesting and informative presentations today. The workshop has provided important updates on the work of the WTO Secretariat to facilitate the implementation of transparency provisions. I trust that the presentations have helped to increase members' understandings of the relevant online tools, in particular, the notifications and outreach functionalities of the IPing's SPS TBT platform. As I mentioned earlier, the Secretariat will welcome members' feedback and comment on the use of the IPing SPS and TBT platform. With these few remarks, let me remind you that this workshop was recorded in English, French, and Spanish, the official language of the WTO. The video recording, as well as all the presentations delivered, will be made available on the dedicated webpage for this event. The webpage link is again being put on the chat now. I will also make a short factual report on today's discussions that will be shared with delegates by email and include the summary report of the formal SPS committee's meeting. The Secretariat will also prepare a brief report on the workshop, which will be circulated at a later date. Before closing, I would like to again draw the attention to the notification clinic sessions, which will be held this afternoon at 3 p.m. via Zoom only. The link to the notifications clinic is again being added to the chat now. I would like to invite those interested, in particular from the SPS notification authorities and inquiry point, to join the discussion this afternoon. For my closing words, once again, I want to thank the secretariats for preparing this meeting. I want to thank the IT teams, the interpreters, for the very excellent work on IP tools that was just shared with members. I also want to thank all participants and those attending online for their kind attendance and contributions. With this, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks.